Okay, good idea.
They just go with the flow. It's the Hershey and Keegs Show.
Welcome to Hershey and the Keegs Show, starring pitcher Mark Hirschman and his personal catcher, Mike Keegan. Every Tuesday night at 9 p.m. live from the Governor's Comedy Club radio studio. Thanks so much for listening.
Oh, well, it is Tuesday night, 9 p.m. We are here. It's the Hershey and the Keegs Show. Mike Keegan, Tony Walker, Mark Hirschman. Let's have some fun. We have a great guest coming on today.
We're going to have so much fun. We're excited. We've been texting back and forth all day long.
Me and you?
Well, I've been texting you. You're not responding.
Oh, yeah,
generally what happens.
True. That's true.
But I've been texting the both of you all day.
Yes.
I think Tony.
I read them.
I think Tony accidentally responded to one of them, but he thought it was his wife, actually. So.
What did I say?
You just said hello, I love you, and I thought you were talking to me, but it wasn't.
Make sure you wear that sexy outfit tonight.
No, it was probably. It was actually.
Yeah, it was.
Mike.
So we are super excited to have the great Kimberly Jones on with us tonight.
Yes.
And as we always do, we're just going to start with a quick run of sponsors. Tony is going to turn Mike's mic off so he makes no snickers or sneers. And
Snickers is a sponsor?
They are a sponsor.
Okay.
I have a Snickers story to tell you after the show, by the way.
Sure you do.
The Hershey and Keegs Show is proudly sponsored by Demolition Specialists, 1-855 Rip-Outs, the number you call for demolition, dumpsters, and fence rental. Family owned and operated for over 30 years, they are a fully licensed demolition contractor. Angela's Bra Boutique at 223 Main Street in Farmingdale. 516-249-6509. Personalized bra fittings, providing a wide selection of brands, sizes, and styles. Hershey and the Keegs Show is brought to you by Triple M Professional Painting and Construction. 516-395-6390. Family owned and operated for over 35 years. Call for your free estimate today and ask for James. We are brought to you by Impressions Dance Studio. Reach them at 516-735-0545. Take life by the hand and dance. 3103 North Jerusalem Road in Levittown. www.impressionsdancestudio.com. And finally, Sunray Services. Now is the best time to convert to hybrid heating and cooling. Call them today at 631-231-5533 or visit them online at www.sunrayservices.com. That will conclude our first set of sponsors. We will get back to the second set towards the end of the show.
Well done, Marky.
Thank you so much, sir.
Well done, Marky.
I appreciate it. And with no further ado, we have waiting for us in Zoom world the wonderful Kimberly Jones, who we are super excited to have. Hello, Miss Kim Jones. How are you?
Hello, how are you?
We're so happy to have
Doing
you.
Great,
and,
Kim. We're honored to have you here. We're so excited.
Oh, thank you.
We all shared a good laugh before the show. I don't know if you heard, but the fact that you had tweeted out yesterday that you were looking for Hersh on Long Island. He booked me for a show, and I lost his contact information.
Yeah, and there's a long story behind that no one else would be interested in.
No.
But yes, and I said to myself, this guy's going to think I'm blowing him off. I want to do the podcast, and here we are. So it worked out.
I loved it.
For future reference, how do I lose his contact information?
That's right. Mike's been trying to lose my contact information since 2011, and it's not working. But we found each other, and I'm so happy to have you here. And there's really so much to cover. Certainly your resume is just so lengthy and impressive, from Star Ledger to WFAN to Yankee Clubhouse reporter to NFL Network to most recently for Newsday. Is there anything that you wanna hot take us and tell us about something that's on the horizon for Kim Jones right now?
I hope there is after this podcast. Let's put it that way. I'll tell you what. I left Newsday, my choice, and it's been rough, but I knew it was going to be. I went into it eyes wide open in that vein, but. Yeah, I'd like to be working, and who knows? Maybe someone sees this and someone can help me out. But we'll see.
Absolutely.
We'll see. I have plenty of stories to tell. I have so much more to give, but it takes two to tango. Yeah,
you definitely have such a it's amazing. I was kind of putting my notes together, and it's such an incredible story. I mean, obviously you went to Penn State, you worked for the Star Ledger, and then not too many years years after, it's 2005. You're replacing Susan Waldman as the Yankee clubhouse reporter. What kind of pressure did you feel? How did that feel? Tell us a little bit about that at that time.
It's a really good question. And the one thing I can tell you is, not being from this market, I grew up in York, Pennsylvania. I had been here with the Star Ledger, like you noted, for a little while, but I wasn't immersed in this market. So I was also young, where'd the youth go, but I was young and hungry to be what I thought I could be in this business, even though at the time I had no idea what the future would hold. And I think that, I was less afraid then, if that makes sense.
Sure.
I think it's when I get a little older, I think I overthink too much.
Sure.
And that's a detriment, I think, to probably almost anyone, and certainly to myself. So, but back then, Susan was very gracious. She was happy with the move, which was important. I certainly wouldn't have wanted to go in and I didn't know much about Susan initially. Again, I didn't grow up in the market, but looking back, I really didn't want to be on Susan's bad side.
That's right.
To start off, because that probably would not have bode well, certainly for me. But she was wonderful. She was a mentor. She's absolutely a legend. Her longevity, but also the quality of her work, and the quality of her work has never dipped. And I know I can't always say that. So I have great admiration and gratitude for Susan Waldman. She showed me the way. And then ultimately my next step was a football step, which I don't think really surprised anyone, including myself.
Yeah, so, those football years, certainly the transition was made, I guess it was from you to Meredith, and for us diehard Yankee fans, I'm a diehard Yankee fan. Mike over here is a diehard Yankee fan, so we were obviously huge Kim Jones fans, so the transition to Meredith Marakovich was fine, but there was definitely, would you say, Mike, that we, at the time were like, what happened to Kim Jones?
And especially, those are my formative Yankee years, so...
And so Kim's for me, the surreal feeling of you're in the clubhouse and you're there with it's Jeter and Bernie and Posada, and then later on Cece and Teixeira, and you're there for the 2009 championship. Like,
goodness, yes.
I mean, how do you at some point, at this point in your life, reflect back? Not that you're anywhere close to the end of your career, but do you think like, whoa, that was pretty sick?
Yeah, I did that almost immediately. I mean, I got a pendant for the championship series, and I just looked at it, and I'm thinking to myself, I grew up in York, Pennsylvania. I was an Eagles fan. I was a Georgetown basketball fan. I absolutely loved Len Bias. I hope. I don't know if you guys are old enough.
Oh no, you and I are actually 2 years apart, so I remember Len Bias very well.
Old enough.
Yeah.
Len Bias could walk on the moon. He was so great.
Rest in peace.
I actually got to meet him one time.
Jeez.
And it was amazing for a very young, Kim Jones. I don't mean to use for a third person there, but you guys.
No, that's okay, Ricky Henderson. It's okay.
To meet him, because the boys basketball coach at our high school had him up to talk to the boys team. He knew I was a crazy Len Bias fan, and I will tell you this. I don't think I'm still over the fact that he died when he died, because he would have been remarkable when you talk about growing through the NBA and his great gifts, because he could do no wrong. He could walk on water far as I was concerned. So he was such a good player. The
hair on my arm is standing up a little bit hearing you talk about it. And the only thing I can kind of compare to that, even though I was only 8-9 years old at the time, but on August 2nd, 1979, when Thurman Munson perished, it was certainly a day that I've never forgotten about. And when Len Bias passed, you were a little bit older, but you obviously, it's affected you every single day of your life, I'm sure, since then.
I think about it every day. I think about it one way or another. I think about it every day. And by the way, Mrs. Thurman Munson was always a highlight at the Yankees Old Timers Day.
Old Timers Day, yeah.
she and the other gals, I used to sit in the dugout. We just laugh, and that was a wonderful part. One day, but a wonderful part of that Yankee season every year.
Yeah,
great.
I love the fact that the Yankees and the Steinbrenner family to this day will still bring out Billy Martin's wife and Thurman's wife, and really just as a testament to the family oriented aspect around the Yankees. So that had to be old timers day. You're in there, and at the time, 2005, you still had Yogi, you still had some of the guys who had passed. What was that like for you?
It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. And now listen, I grew up an Orioles fan, but it was an amazing time to cover the Yankees. I'm so grateful for that time. I will tell you this, and I've never really said this. First of all, I don't know that many people care about me, which is fine.
They do.
We do.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But the Yankees' job is the one where I look back and say, I probably should have stayed longer. Because now, I'm not suggesting I would have brought another world championship by then, but you never know. But
You never know.
Exactly. It wouldn't have hurt.
I'm kidding. But it was a wonderful time, and the thing about it was, and I was much younger then, of course, but and I know that people are going to roll their eyes and be like, oh yeah, Crimea River, but like. The tenor of a baseball season was never ending. It just felt that way to me. And when the opportunity came up and it was to go to NFL Network,
That's right.
I obviously took it.
I get 162 games of a long season.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't really look back, but later I looked back and said, I could still be there now.
Yeah.
I could still be there now, conceivably. You never know that.
Yeah, well,
you have to take a chance, right? You gotta at some point roll the dice, bet on yourself, and see what happens.
It's easy to have 20/20 hindsight, but I will tell you that you made a huge impact at the NFL Network. And one of the things that I always took note of, and I'd like for you to touch on this, is that when Odell Beckham Jr. was a Giant, he was a very misunderstood player. And the one person in the New York media who seemed to have a little bit of a different relationship with Odell Beckham Jr. was Kim Jones. And why was that? And how did that manifest itself? Please tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, it's actually, I'm glad you asked. I didn't know if we'd get into that or not. I wasn't going to bring it up necessarily, I guess. But, Odell was drafted and it was fanfare. I mean, we see Malik being drafted by the Giants and what that seems to mean for that team. Well, that was Odell back in the day.
Yeah,
sure was.
And I remember very vividly parts of all of this, and the key parts in particular. I remember in preseason, he was having issues with, I believe it was his calf, but it was an injury issue.
Yep.
I think it was his calf.
Mm-hmm.
And calves are tricky injuries, but I'm not 100% sure it was the calf, but you know what I mean? Like he wasn't able to get on the field, training camps opening, that kind of a thing.
Sure.
And I remember for some reason, John Mara and I crossed paths during a practice. I certainly wasn't on the field, so he would have been up, somehow. But I know it was with John, and John said to me, he never had these issues at LSU. What's going on with him? And I thought, oh wow, obviously he had the owner's attention because they thought he had so much promise. And sure. Odell ended up talking to me about some of that.
Yeah.
And I told him, and he said, Coach Coughlin wants me to practice and he doesn't understand. I want to practice. I can't practice. It's not that I don't want to practice.
Yeah.
And I looked at him and I said, why don't you go upstairs and tell him that? And he did. And
Wow.
at that moment, I think Odell learned to trust me, and Tom Coughlin stopped complaining about the calf, knowing that this kid really wants to be on the
He
field.
wants to be there. And wow.
You know, he's a
that's
rookie.
incredible.
He didn't, you know, and a rookie back then is different than a rookie now. Today,
Right.
they know everything about the kid, including the toothpaste.
That's
Yeah.
right. Exactly.
You know, these days, back then, maybe not quite as much. Maybe they're thinking, what's going on here? Does he want to play? That kind of thing. And that was where Odell, you know, learned to trust me, which I really appreciated. And I haven't talked to him now in years. I mean, that's life, right? That's
Yeah.
how it goes. But I remember that, and Gary Reese had said to me immediately after they drafted Odell, I want you to meet him because you're going to love this kid. And I'll tell you what, I don't always think Jerry Reese got the fairest of deals with the Giants.
He definitely did not. Two-time champion. No way.
Yeah. And in my opinion, you know, he was on it. He got it.
Yeah.
He understood.
So,
And
you know,
yeah, it was an interesting time. That was a very interesting time for me.
I think that, in my opinion, being a sports fan for 40 plus years in New York, Odell Beckham is a perfect example of what the New York media cauldron can do to a player. And for some reason, there were people in the media that had it out for him, and there was no good reason why, because he may have been the singular greatest talent that the Giants ever drafted outside of Lawrence Taylor, and yet he never got a fair shake. And so I again, in my mind, I always remembered, like, boy, he seems to really be a nice guy when he talks to Kim Jones.
Yeah, that's
like,
right.
you know,
the
that
media
was
can create any kind of person that they want to create.
and they did that, and they did that, and I think that he left town because of that reason, and his career hasn't been the same. It's almost like a Darryl Strawberry situation where he regrets leaving, and I'm sure if Odell could have stayed, he would have.
Yeah, and you know, the boat trip, which Ben McAdoo,
Certainly didn't help.
you know, endorsed.
Yeah.
They asked Ben McAdoo if they could go,
Yeah.
and he said yes. It was McAdoo then, right? I believe
Yeah, it was McAdoo,
yeah.
sure.
Yeah, it was McAdoo, and the coach said yes. Now, could the coach, you know, bar them from going? My guess is no, but they kind of, from what I remember and from a pretty clear memory of that part of the story, they asked and he said yes. I thought it was a weird decision at the time, but
Here, yeah,
you know, they have a couple days off. They're going to blow off steam, and then
To young
you know,
kids. What were you doing when you were a young
that's what it is.
kid,
As
Mike?
a former athlete myself, though, if my coach said not to do something, I
Right.
wouldn't do it.
Mike
And the
is a
coach gave it-
professional athlete.
Exactly.
great. And then they end up going to Green Bay and, you know, freezing
Yeah.
every
Yeah.
body part off, and
Exactly.
you know.
So,
That was a turning point.
Kim, you mentioned, it's a good segue for me. You mentioned John Mara. We're talking about your relationship with players in the media. Certainly, as a Penn State alum, let's talk a little bit about another Penn State alum that I know you've interviewed over the years, Mr. Saquon Barkley. Yes, there you go. So certainly, Mike and I talk about this. Mike is a diehard Bills fan. I am sadly a Jets fan since 1970 something. But the concept that the Giants have retained Dayball and Shane after letting McKinney go, letting Saquon go, and then Saquon doing what he's doing down the turnpike. I don't really grasp it. I don't understand how those guys are retained. And what did you feel like when Saquon left? And do you think it was the right move for the Giants at the time?
I don't think this administration, not talking about ownership,
Okay.
but this administration had any idea what they had in the locker room in Saquon Barkley.
Oh, wow.
And I think that is absolutely damning.
Yeah, and that's why he was mismanaged.
I say it because of this. Because if they knew, they should have been gone. So that's why I'm giving them the out, that they didn't understand what they had in the locker room, especially with Saquon Barkley. Because if they knew and still got rid of him, that is absolutely sick. That is a wrong move every day.
I think you're 100% right. And plus, he's playing this year with a big chip on his shoulder. He's
Yeah, of
just so
course.
motivated.
What kind of kid did you think he was when you? I'm assuming you interviewed him originally when he was at Penn State. What did you think? What did you think of Saquon at that time?
Yeah, I'm still a James Franklin fan, by the way. He's
That's
my
okay.
guy.
That's okay.
He's my guy.
That's all right.
And he told me I had to meet Saquon. And he was right, and it was cool. Again, I haven't talked to some of these guys, including Saquon, in a long time. Hopefully, down the road we do again.
Yeah.
I don't think there are hard feelings. I just think he's got a new team, and he's trying to win a Super Bowl, by the way.
Yeah.
So,
Insane.
yeah, I just remember James Franklin saying to me, "You're going to love this guy," and having no idea that he'd be drafted here, you know, because you couldn't know. I mean, this was when he was younger. But Saquon, without getting personal with Saquon stuff, even though it's a couple years ago, one thing that struck me was at Penn State, Saquon trusted his teammates with a couple of things. The one I'll tell you about is that he was going to go pro after that season. No, okay, not a huge surprise, right?
No.
But he trusted his teammates with that. Now, Penn State is not the journalism mecca of the world.
Nope.
But that never leaked until Saquon was ready to make that pronouncement. I think that says a lot about Saquon Barkley and who he is and who he has always been. He told me once for a 3,000, and yes, I think it was 3,000 word story I wrote on him for NFL Network. You know, his family didn't have a car for years. His dad would walk him to practice and back, and that kind of thing. And then you see him. It was on TV the other day, but you see him with his family, his young family.
Yes.
That gets me. That gets me because he made it.
Yeah.
He made it.
And
he made it not once at expense of other people.
Yep.
And how many of us can truly say that?
Not Mike.
Not me, but
You know, but
I
it's
ride on your back, Hersh.
It's interesting.
But-
like Mike and I were talking about this the other day. Obviously, I as a Jet fan wish that I had Saquon on my team. You as a Bills guy, but he is so glib and personable and kind when you're into, like, there's just no fluff there, right? I mean, it just seems like he's just such a good guy. And then I watch him run for 200 yards, and I'm like, what were the Giants doing? What happened? How did this fall apart? How do you let that fall apart? It makes no sense to me.
I think Saquon has become what he is because he's grateful, because of how he did grow up, you know, sharing a mattress with a brother, that kind of thing. And I have great respect for people who come through that. You know, the Covenant House that Saquon spent a night at every year that he was here, you know, because that was a chance for them to make some money and everything else. You know, he's taken that stuff to heart. Again, I haven't talked to Saquon in ages, but I still know that part of Saquon Barkley and that time in his life.
He could have handled things a lot differently also after the Daniel Jones deal, and him getting the franchise tag.
And he didn't.
He handled it well.
He did.
Well, yeah. And the one other thing, if I may, I'm sorry if I interrupted.
Please, yeah.
There was a point where Saquon said that he told the Giants, just give it to me straight.
Yeah.
Did they?
Well,
I mean, in a way they did, I guess. But
no.
the adult in that room, in my opinion, was the player.
Saquon Barkley, yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, we had a chance to watch the video because the HBO show, and essentially the way it seemed when Mara had stepped in and said, I'll have nightmares forever if this guy goes down the turnpike. And I got the idea that Shane was basically just playing his hand and, like, no one's giving this guy that money, and then they gave him the money, and then he was left with his pants down. And I think that alone, in addition to the McKinney loss, just showed to me that maybe Shane, and I'm not a guy who wants to just dump all over people, but those are two substantial moves that the best offensive player arguably in the league and one of the best defensive players walked under your regime, and the Giants were 4-14, whatever they were this year, you know, so 4-13. So, you know, I think that was a pretty piss poor job, and I think they're lucky to have their jobs there at Giant Stadium.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to pour hot water, cold water, or whatever on this. But, you know, by the way, Josh Allen is still a hell of a quarterback without Dable.
Yeah.
It's the coach.
He sure is, but Dable did a lot early in his career for him. But, you know, but he still is. You're 100% right.
MVP potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and a great guy. The one thing when I was at NFL Network, I spent a lot of time at Buffalo because both the Jets and Giants weren't very good at the time. Imagine that, right?
no, can't imagine it.
And
At the time.
and
At the time.
Josh Allen is like a top 3 guy for me.
Wow.
Even now, like, I mean, I haven't talked to him again, in a long time.
Yeah.
But if I did run into him, like, we'd have a great conversation, like we always did. He was one of those guys who never acted like you were bothering him at all, even though he's only the starting quarterback and he has precious time.
Yeah, exactly.
And yet he has a way about him that's very almost charming, but I don't mean that in any kind of a weird way.
I completely get what you're saying. I see that.
Really, down to earth guy. Grew up in a really small town out west. He just a really good guy.
Yeah, looking in from the outside.
I've been so lucky. I've been so lucky to talk to and to get to know a little bit these people that we're talking.
And they're
about.
lucky to talk to you.
Grateful.
They are. And Kim, this is a perfect opportunity, actually. Speaking of lucky, I want to kind of take a little bit of a step back in your life. And before I do that, I'm going to talk about something a friend of mine for many years and a friend from Mike's also. I mentioned this a little bit, via email a few weeks ago because I wanted to make sure that you were comfortable for me to discuss it. But last September of 2020, 23, I guess it was, so a year and a half ago almost, a very dear friend of myself and Mike as well. His name is Mike Champy. He's a longtime teacher and dean of students at James Madison High School, dear friend of mine for many years, and Mike as well. He was walking up the steps at James Madison for his first day of school. He fell ill. He didn't know what was going on. Next thing you know, he was passed out cold, rushed to the hospital. He was informed, his family was informed, I should say, that he suffered from a massive aortic dissection, 12-hour emergency life-saving surgery at Maimonides High School, preceded by a coma for the next couple of weeks. And thank God today he is watching the show. He's a big fan. He's a big fan of yours because he is very, very knowledgeable of the fact that on November 15th, 2018 at Redskins practice, Kim Jones also suffered from this horrible thing. And if you don't mind touching on it a little bit, Kim, we would love that.
I'm glad that was a happy ending, guys.
Yeah, I mean, and there's a lot more to the story. I mean, he was in a coma. He was in the hospital for months. He was in rehab. So there's his story was not out of the hospital in a week. It's very lengthy, but for the sake of time, it was important for me to mention it. And Mike wanted to talk about it as well. And we know that you suffered this same situation. So please tell us about your experience and how you're doing today.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm doing great today, so I am incredibly lucky. I was at the Redskins facility, and it was the Redskins facility then. I can't.
Yep, that's what it was. That's what it was. Facts are facts.
Right. And we were getting ready to do a report for NFL Network. And I'd never done this before, but I said to my producer, Michelle, I said, I don't feel well. It was within 10 minutes of the hit, probably, maybe 15. And I said, I just don't feel well. And I thought, Kim, just take a couple breaths. Like, you're fine. I ended up trying to go outside. It was a cold day. It was winter. And I took a step and kind of lost my balance. And I thought, what in the world is going on here?
What's happening here? Yeah.
I ended up collapsing, and they called for medical assistance from the Redskins staff. I learned later there are parts of this that get me. So, but I think I'm good here.
Yeah.
That on Thursdays, and that was a Thursday, the cardiologist is either cardiologist or something kind of sort of towards there. I think it's cardiologist was there. But he was never there on Thursdays. Well, this was a Thursday.
No.
And he immediately called for an ambulance and for me to go to Inova Fairfax. And I remember being in the ambulance with the shining lights, and it was dark by then because in the winter months it's always going to be dark by then. And I remember wondering what was happening. So I was still conscious to some degree, in and out of consciousness. And I got finally to the hospital, and I later learned that there was a cardiologist on duty, Dr. Linda Bogar, and she told me later that she thought that she could have done my surgery, but she chose instead to save the surgery for Dr. Spear and Dr. Ryan, Dr. Alan Spear and Dr. Liam Ryan, because they were the best of the best.
Wow.
And they saved my life the next morning. She told me later that she kept me stable, and if anything had happened, she would have done the surgery. But instead, I lucked out. I mean, the luck that I'm here is something I think about almost every day. For a long time, I thought about it every day. I think about it a lot of days because there are a lot of people who don't get that kind of an opportunity. I was very lucky to be at Inova. Dr. Ryan is just an incredible surgeon, as is Dr. Spear, who I believe now is retired. But I remember when they were rolling me in to surgery and I had to sign something. I mean, imagine the state I'm in and, imagine how that, sometimes I wonder, like, what did that signature look like?
Right, exactly.
Right.
To
Didn't
see
look
it
like
now.
Kimberly A. Jones.
Yeah.
But, and I said, could I die? And the person, and for some reason, I can't remember if it was a male or female. I think it was a male, but I can't be sure.
Yeah, that's okay that you didn't remember.
The person immediately said yes.
Wow.
And I remember saying, I don't want to die yet.
Wow.
Whew.
My God.
Wow. Certainly you're lucky, and we are all lucky. I mean, geez, Louise, that is unbelievable. How long were you in the hospital after that, and how long was your recovery?
That's a good question. I was in the hospital, I want to say for about 10 days.
Okay.
Not like I don't consider that a really protracted, I mean, it's the only time I've been hospitalized, but for what it was, that seems about right. Maybe a day shorter than that. My wonderful friend Tara Sullivan, who works at the Boston Globe, she and I had worked together on the Giants beat way back then. She came and picked me up and took me home, and she's still a great friend today. We don't talk as often because when you get old like us, we don't talk as often,
right.
Unfortunately.
Too tired. Yeah, I know.
I'll never forget her and the role she played in that. It's just, I thank you guys for having me so much because, sometimes you want to remember, like, and one funny, like kind of funny story. I ended up being on the Today Show with Dr. Ryan because it was Heart Health Month. It was February by then, and they wanted to talk about women and being good to themselves and any chances of what you're feeling doesn't seem normal and that kind of thing.
Sure.
So that was just sort of a funny like cap to it all.
Yeah.
You never would have anticipated. Hey, we're on the Today Show.
Exactly.
I think it's important, and you, when we spoke today on the phone, and you had said something that kind of made my ears go up a little bit, and you were excited to come on, and one of the reasons is that you haven't been on a lot of things recently, and I'm thinking to myself, I wonder if this woman realizes just how loved and cherished she is by the New York sports fans. I mean, again, for people like myself and Mike, like Kim Jones was everything.
This is a huge deal for us.
It's It's a big deal. So I think if this does nothing for you other than remind you that you are so important to so many people, and there's so much left on the Kim Jones plate that we know is coming. So again, hopefully you remember Kim Jones is pretty amazing. So we're super excited to have you. I'm going to tell you a little quick anecdote about the time that Mike was in the hospital, because he was in essentially a comatose state for a little period of time and was in ICU for a lengthy period of time. And I'm not telling this story to pat myself on the back, although Tony and Mike will insist that I am.
I think you're talking about me, Mike. I'm like, when was I in a coma?
No. Well, you're in a coma right now. No. So when Mike Champy was in the hospital, and it was several weeks, he will tell the story proudly that all the days that there were visitors and he was out cold, that he proudly today tells the story that the first memory that he has of being in the hospital and being awake again was me at the foot of his bed replaying over and over again on 10 volume Gary Thorne's home run call of Mattingly in the 95 playoffs. I kept on playing it over and over again because him and I were at that game, and obviously for us, the Yankees being in the playoffs for the first time since we were 10 years old, and he will tell that story that was his first memory. So not because it was me, just because
because it was you.
Yeah.
It's awesome. That's great. I love that.
Yeah.
I love stuff like that. I'm a softie. I love all that kind of stuff. I really do.
Oh, speaking of softies, I have to also say that one of our closest friends, who's the sweetest guy in the world, he's a comedian. He's a big supporter of our show. He's become one of the most popular comics on Long Island in New York. His name is Fat Jay, and we're not calling him that because that's just his name, and he knows I don't like calling him that, but that's his name.
It's his stage name,
Fat Jay. So Fat Jay had sent me a message today, and I will tell you that many people sent messages, ask him this, ask him this. And I'm like, no. Me and Mike know what we're doing. But Jay asked a question, and I kind of felt like I was obligated to ask it because he's such a great person. But it really was a great question. When all the days that you were in the clubhouse and you're interviewing players after the games, and I've wanted this a lot of times also, when there's a pitcher, let's just say that CC Sabathia goes out there and just shits the bed. He has a terrible game, 2 1/3. Not that it happened with CC very often, but just performs terribly. Did it feel weird for you, strange for you to go ahead and ask them, like, how did you feel out there today? Like, we see that question sometimes. What did it feel like from the perspective of your side to ask a question like that?
Yeah. Sometimes you thought, like, can I duck out now before post game? No, for sure. I mean, I will say this, and this will get an eye roll from some places.
Mm-hmm.
In my opinion, in my 7 years with the Yankees, that's all I can speak to, obviously, right?
Yep.
Derek Jeter set such a tone of professionalism that even when Randy Johnson was a jerk to me, which happened,
yep.
And you've got to just, you just kind of take it. I mean, that's him. And I always used to say to myself, that's a reflection of him, not you. But to be honest, there probably were some really dumb questions I asked him.
Sure.
That after the loss, Randy Johnson was like, she doesn't even know what a sinker is. Like, what are we doing here? So I get it. I do. I get it. I promise I get it.
Yeah.
But, I saw Derek, this is going back several years, somewhere, I can't remember why we were we certainly weren't together in the same place, but somehow I saw him somewhere and I thanked him. Because Derek Jeter meant a lot to my career in the sense of the professionalism that I just spoke of. He always knew as the captain, we needed him to speak. And I was usually the first voice there, not always, but usually the first voice there. And he was very gracious to me. He would tease me about some things, with the media not there. I'll tell you one story, but I won't tell you the reporter's name. I was in the clubhouse, and Derek mocked one of my questions in a way that I was used to. Like, it wasn't bad-natured. It was not mean-spirited.
Playful.
Wasn't any of that. Right, playful. That's a good word, I guess. And a media member who was not there all the time laughed his head off as if Derek just kicked my tail out of the room and told me never to come back.
Yeah.
Right.
The next day, Derek said to me, "You didn't like when I poked fun at you yesterday." And I said it had nothing to do with you. And I told him why. Yeah. And he said, "Walk over with me when I get my tickets." Back then, the players had to sign out for their own tickets.
Yep.
He's doing his ticket. And he said, "Ask me a couple questions that'll help you for your pregame today."
Whoa. Wow.
That's awesome.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And I said, okay.
Yeah.
And I think, those are moments that I still cherish. I mean, those are moments, he's a really, not that he ever needs my endorsement on anything. I think he's a really good guy and good natured, and his parents would be nice to me. Like if I saw them passing, in the corridor or something like that. It was a funny time.
It's so great to hear that, because I'm, like I said before, I'm on the outside looking in. Derek Jeter was my favorite ball player.
Yep.
Like I remember his last game, he got that hit. I was on the road driving to a gig. I couldn't even watch it on TV, and I cried. And I DVD'd his last game, and I've watched it. It was in my DVD queue for like 3 years afterwards. And just to, he comes off on TV like a great guy. But when you hear somebody who actually has experience with him say it.
Now you're hearing he's a mensch. That makes
exactly.
you feel even better. You got tears in your eyes.
I do.
I made Stabile cry last week. I'm going to make you cry this week.
Derek Jeter again.
That is such a cool thing, because we all love Derek Jeter. So you're saying that he's one of your favorite players. I was going to play a little game with you, and I was going to give you 500 guesses to see if you can guess the shirt that I'm wearing, the name on the back of my shirt. And the truth is, don't look. Don't look. The name of the player so I have two favorite players growing up as a Yankee fan. Let's say my Yankee fanness started in 77, 78. My number one player is Greg Nettles. My number two player is the shirt I'm wearing. I will give you a hint, and this may be a little bit before your time because you were a kid at the time as well, but he was a lefty hitting outfielder who played for the Yankees in the mid-'80s, originally from Yonkers, got traded to the White Sox, and I love him to this day. Do you know who I'm referring to?
No, because I was wrapped up in my own teams back then.
That's right.
I was not a Yankees person.
So so I'll tell you, my favorite player as a kid after Nettles was Dan Pasqua, which was before your time a little bit.
Oh, I never would have gotten that one.
Yeah.
That makes me feel better.
Dan Pasqua wouldn't have gotten that one.
Can I just tell you something, though? And this is a story that I reached out to Dan Pasqua about a year ago when I tried to invite him on the podcast, and he's not really comfortable with stuff like that, so he actually said no. Yeah, but he doesn't do any podcasts. I reached out to the White Sox. Yeah, it wasn't just me. But I told him I told him a story that happened in 2009 involving him. I was at Yankee Stadium, 2009, Game 6. I was there with my wife, who was pregnant with my son at the time, and I was walking through the corridor of the new stadium. And if you know how the new stadium is, there's actually restaurant seating where you can sit in the kind of walkway, the breezeway. And I was walking, and I looked to my right, and I saw an older-looking, bald Dan Pasqua. Now, 50,000 people could have walked past Dan Pasqua, and nobody was recognizing Dan Pasqua. But me being the psychopath Dan Pasqua fan, I happened to have a Paul O'Neill jersey on, but underneath it, I had a Dan Pasqua t-shirt on, the same one I'm wearing right now. Yeah. And I pulled the jersey off, and I showed it him, and he gave me like a fist bump, like, whoa, this kid actually recognized me, you know?
Exactly.
And
that's awesome.
When I reached out to Pasqua via email last year, I said, you know what, even though it's how many years later? 14, 15 years later? I'm going to tell him the story. He's like, dude, I'm not coming on your podcast because it's not my thing, but I absolutely remember you at the Yankee game that day.
That's crazy.
And why? Because nobody else. Yeah, like he's not Dan Pasqua played with the Yankees in 1986. This was 2009. Awesome. So I thought that story would get him to come on. Yeah. Still wouldn't come on.
Also, the 86 Yankees weren't the 96 Yankees.
Oh, and before I forget, one person that did come on that had a really great time with Mike and I, who I think he didn't expect to. He was going to give us 10 minutes, and then he gave us almost an hour. And he texted me today to say, please say hello to my friend Kim Jones, was Russ Salzberg. He asked me to say hello to you.
Russ.
Yeah.
I love Russ.
He's great, and like I said,
He has a podcast.
he does have a podcast, and he came on ours, and he only expected to do a few minutes, and he was very gun shy at the time because he didn't know. A lot of times when people Herschy and Keegs, like the Carlins and the Evan Roberts, they know of us a little bit because of me and calling in the fan all those years. So they came on with no issue. But Russ didn't know me or know Mike at all, and he said, "I'm going to give you guys 10 minutes," and then he came on, and he was how great was he?
He was awesome. He was great, and he didn't expect to stay that long.
Yeah,
because you don't know what you're walking into if you don't know us. Like we're comedians.
Yeah, we're sitting at Governor's Comedy Club on Long Island, which is the A comedy club in all of Long Island, one of the best in New York. So people just think we're clowns basically, but we're not. We are clowns and we're comics, but we are sports lovers. From Tony being a diehard Met fan to Mike and I being diehard Yankee fans, and me Jets and him Bulls. Bills.
Bills.
Did you like the Bulls also?
I like when I was a kid, I liked to buy a Bulls starter jacket because I was a kid in Jordan's.
Yeah. So I didn't want to be remiss in telling you that Russ sends his best. Yeah,
I love it. Should I start a podcast?
Yes, 100%.
You know what's funny? I saw a couple of people when I was reading the comments of people when Kim was saying, "Does anyone know Herschy on Long Island?"
Somebody on your Twitter when you wrote that, somebody on your Twitter said you should start.
I didn't know what to do. I thought I lost you.
Yeah. So I will say, and again, you seem, as we find a lot of times, barring a couple of people, we've had a lot of pretty strong celebrities on here. There's a strong humility with most people, and finding it very powerful with Kim. You are so loved that if you do a podcast, I think that you will have in the thousands of listeners very quickly.
Right away.
You might need a little technical support, lose the big bowl behind you.
Yeah, that looks nice, right? Yeah. It's like the sun.
Yeah. You're living you're still in Jersey, is that right, Kim?
I'm in Jersey, yeah.
Okay, so you certainly have an open invite from Tony, our producer, to come in and do a debut podcast if you want. We have a beautiful studio here with wonderful equipment, and you're always welcome to do that. Just like Peter Schwartz, by the way. Peter Schwartz from FAN was a guest of ours. Well, he does a show right from the studio after coming on as a guest with me about 6 months ago. Peter's been doing a show now for how long, Tony?
Since October.
And Peter had Phil Simms on last week. He had Andre Reed from the Bills on, I believe, this afternoon. He's had Howard Johnson on. So, yeah, things are growing here. But, Tony, you let me know if you ever want to come in and talk to Tony. We'd love to have you. Listen, we can go on all day and night, but obviously out of respect for your time, we're not going to do that. All I can say is, on behalf of myself and Mike and Tony, our producer, we have been so delighted and honored to have you. You are as wonderful as we expected, and if you ever want to come back and talk more, we can literally go on for an eternity, and we're just super appreciative of having you today, Kim.
Yeah.
So, you don't have any more questions?
Oh, I mean, we can keep going. I certainly have plenty if you want. We have 15 more minutes. I can definitely keep on going.
Let's do a couple more minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I wanted to talk to you about was when you were a kid in college. I assume you were probably doing journalism, sports journalism, something like that.
Right, journalism, yep.
What was the path? Is it going to be like Kim Jones is going to write for the Star Ledger, or you're going to wind up working for, what was your original path? What did you think you were going to do?
I thought I was going to aspire to cover Penn State and to probably stay there for a long time.
Wow.
And there were a couple of other guys on the beat, older guys on the beat, who really pushed me to say, no, you need to move on. You need to move on. And I certainly don't now wonder if that was the right idea. But for a while I did, just because, you go from middle of Pennsylvania, which is where I'm from, to Jersey, to, some other places that you're just not in sync with. Mm-hmm. And as a single person, it was daunting at times. Mm-hmm. I learned early to bet on myself, and I don't say that with any jerkiness or anything. But I kind of learned you can't do it halfway. You got to really try to do it.
Right.
And I remember leaving Pennsylvania. My car had, some things in it. I mean, it was a Corolla, so it didn't have a lot in it, but it had what I thought I needed at least to get started in Jersey.
Yeah.
And I got pulled over by the cop.
Oh
And
God.
I was still in Pennsylvania, and he, said, "Do you know how fast you were going, or whatever?" And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I'm emotional. I'm leaving.
Trying to get the hell out of Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
to go to Pennsylvania." And he still gave me the ticket.
Oh man.
So,
Wow.
It's Kim
at
Jones.
that point, I was, I needed a tiny break from Pennsylvania. I love Pennsylvania. It's a good state. It's truly like who I am, kind of. And it gave me a great start. So
this might be a little bit of a tough question, but you're not afraid of anything. So,
No.
as a Penn State tried and true Nittany Lion, my goodness, yeah, like listen, you asked to stay on the show, so
No, I'm with you.
yeah.
I know.
At the time, how did it feel, and how does it feel today? Obviously, for a long period of time, you were a lover of Joe Pa. There's no question about it.
Yeah.
So, how did that affect you when it went down? Literally went down, the statue, and where are you at now with it? Trying to piece in your mind all that happened during those years.
I wasn't on the beat then. I remember calling Mike Francesa from the Penn State campus when it broke about Jerry Sandusky and everything there. I still have questions about that. And that doesn't mean I don't believe. It means I still have open-ended questions about all of that. Because Jerry Sandusky back then, did have kids around him a lot.
Sure.
For the Second Mile, which was his charity. And it never felt overly wrong because it was fairly often.
Yeah.
But I think that whole situation, I do think, helped me become a better, not necessarily a better person, but a better skeptic when it comes to things, because it isn't always as it seems. And I think as a reporter, that was a lesson for me, even though I didn't conceptualize it as that at the time. But you do have to wonder. You do have to ask questions. You have to say, wait a minute, does that make sense to you? Because this doesn't make sense to me, that kind of a thing.
Did you feel, and I know a lot of Penn State fans did you feel hurt about Joe Pa, and were you empathetic? Were you angry? I mean, what were your emotions? The alleged stories were that he was aware of some of this stuff, and I have questions too. So, what were your feelings about Joe Pa and the fall of what led to him eventually dying because of everything?
Yeah, and I was at that funeral. I walked back in the back, and I sat with Jay Paterno for a time. And Jay said, this is self-serving, but it's been a long time, and I'm not saying it because it's self-serving. Jay said, my dad really respected how you did your job. And I said, I said, thanks, Jay.
It's not an easy job at that time.
Man.
Yeah.
It's a funny story. A friend of ours, Richie Byrne, he's a local comedian. He's the national headliner. He used to warm up the audience for the Dr. Oz show. He's actually a huge fan of yours and wanted me to tell you. He said hello. But speaking of that, he has a great story. He was doing a string of shows in State College at that time with another friend of ours, Pat O'Rourke. And the producer of those shows is this guy, Scott Bruce. He's from State College. He owns a couple of comedy clubs. He said, whatever you do on any of these shows, do not mention Sandusky. Do not mention the situation. Every single audience, they didn't mention it one time. Every single audience after the show was upset that they didn't make fun of the situation and address it.
Oh,
or
really?
anything.
Oh, wow.
They were mad at the comics for not bringing it up, but they were specifically told not to. So it's a tough time to do anything in that
I can't
area.
even imagine to this day what it's like. And again, growing up as a fan for Kim and then having to cover it, and I just imagine like the mix of emotions must have been unbelievable.
Yeah, and to take it back to the football field, just because so much time has passed now.
Yeah,
I remember when Penn State played its next game, there was an official, John O'Neill, and he always screwed Penn State whenever he could. And the interim coach that day ended up when they got back to playing. And I can't remember if that was the next week or 2 weeks. I just can't remember that. But whenever Penn State played another game, I remember the interim coach saying later, I think to me, but it was just a conversation. It wasn't a reporting thing, that he asked, are we going to get a fair shot today? And the official didn't answer him. And that's how heightened and understandably so, in some cases, like how the temperature was was high. I mean, that's it's an awful story. It's an awful, it's just awful.
Yeah, there's no winners out of that story.
There's no but there's not a but to go to. There's not a, well, it's okay. It's not okay. No, it's not okay.
Yeah.
But now it's been so long.
Yeah.
And it's something that I think a lot of people probably learned from. I have to believe that there were lessons learned by someone and some people, because that's the only way you can make any sense of it at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of making sense of something, and this is something that I didn't know I'd have time to ask you about, and it's a little bit of a hot button. So again, if you want to kind of
all the time in the world.
Yeah. So basically, I will say that there's a close friend of mine who is a Division I coach. I'm not going to mention the school or what sport, but we're good buddies, and him and I go back and forth constantly. And the argument for me is basically that the fans in Philadelphia, from the Santa snowballs, from the batteries that JD drew, from the episode that happened this weekend against the Packers fan, I contest that the Philly fans are by far the more vile fan base than the New York fan base, and he contests that I am totally wrong, that because I'm biased as a New York fan. Are you able to answer that question as someone from Pennsylvania who's now more, this direction? Or do you not want to touch it?
No, I mean, I just think that I just think like the Giants fan in particular has just had any hope beaten out of them by now. I mean, when are they going to do anything again? Daboll's coming back. I mean, is that a yay?
Yeah.
And I knew Daboll when he was in Buffalo. Much more. I can tell the pressure gets to him here. Yeah. It's just an odd situation. Daboll, I had higher hopes for, but now in a way, I kind of think Josh was maybe driving that car a little bit more than I thought.
What is Mike and I talk about this all the time? Who's going to be the first team to break this championship snide that we've been on? I mean, there hasn't been a championship since, is it the Giants the last one? Yankees are 09, the Giants are, 11? There hasn't been a championship since. What team is going to do it?
The Buffalo Bills.
The Buffalo Bills. You know what? I guess right now, although we don't consider them the...
Would you root for them?
I do.
Mike is a diehard Bill. He's wearing a Bills hat right now.
Right.
Yeah.
But would the rest of you root for the Bills since it's at least local, or not really?
So, for me, I like Josh Allen. He helped me win my fantasy league this year. My late father was a diehard Lions fan. So, for me, I always find myself rooting for the Lions recently because the Jets are already playing golf by October. So I would say if it's not the Lions, Mike, I will be rooting for your Bills.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Dan Campbell was a Giant, right?
He was a Giant, sure. He was a Lion, and it's funny you say Dan Campbell, because when it comes down to it,
Dan Campbell. I covered Dan Campbell. I love that. I love most of the players in that group, including Strahan, Dan Campbell, Sean O'Hara.
God, he's just so damn likable. Like when he first said at his press conference about running through a wall and all that stuff, like he's the one guy who wasn't bullshitting. Yeah. When Robert Saleh did the all brake, no gas, all this bullshit, whatever it was, or all gas, no brake.
Oh no, and
he was all brake, no gas.
Yeah, exactly.
But all these guys were full of shit, except for Dan Campbell, who is not.
I've told Dan that. Yeah. I've told him. I mean, not exactly that.
Yeah.
I told him
a little classier.
Hey, Hersh told me to say this, Dan.
But Dan wouldn't need it to be. That's the beauty
that's
of
true.
it. But yeah, he's amazing. He's amazing, and his players just seem to buy it. You know, even when people were making fun of him from the outside,
Yeah.
he was already winning over, it seems, the players on the inside. And I think that's a gift. I mean, look around at the coaches in this league now.
Yep.
You know, and I'm not bashing them all. They're not all bad coaches. But when it seems to me that when you're really authentic, and guys, think about the people you know, not the ones in your studio, and I'm just by myself here, so I can think about myself. But, you know, I just think that when you are authentic, it is millions of times better than trying to play any kind of a role. I've covered players who've done that.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna name them.
Yeah.
But it's gross. Like it's gross. They're playing a role as opposed to trying to, you know, win a game. It's odd to me. It's odd. I've never wanted to be that.
So to being genuine, the Mike Tomlins and the Dan Campbells and guys like that, you know, and I think that the Sean McVays as well. Like I think you're right that these guys get players to play hard for them, and they want to join those teams. Where the disarray that's happening here in New York for years and years with the turnover in coaches is really a reflection of they're just getting the wrong guys. You know, so. Listen, Kim, I don't know what to say. I mean, like this has gone better than I could ever imagine, and I had high hopes. We are super appreciative. You are wonderful, and don't forget that, please. If there's anything that we could ever do to help you at all, please don't hesitate to reach out. Throw out a random tweet and come searching for me. Whatever it is.
That's what I'll do.
Yeah.
It worked the first time.
Yeah. Well, now you have my cell phone number, so you can text me, you can call me, and
Okay.
you're just a total delight, and we're so happy to have you. And you know, if you, like I said, we'll hope to have you on again if you'd like, because I think I can cover. Mike and I could probably cover about 3 more hours.
Still
of
do
this.
another hour.
Yeah.
Myself,
So
exactly.
We'll do it.
Thank
We'll
you
do
so
it.
much.
Thank you so
And
much, guys.
I will text you the link tomorrow so you have it if you want to share it with your people, and we'll talk soon. Thanks so much.
And you can put, this is a really dumb question, but I can put the whole link on and people will be able to see it.
Yeah, I'm going to send it to you, the link in the morning or later on tonight. I'll send it to you. Yeah.
Perfect.
Thank you so much, guys.
All right, Kim.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
That was awesome. Thank you. So
Stay
much.
well. Take care. Bye now.
Care.
Oh wow, that was just
She was amazing.
fantastic.
I'm getting so many texts from people saying, how
Oh, that's
she is.
amazing. We're going to take a 2-second break, Mikey, and just do the final set of the sponsors, and then we'll close out the show because I know you have things coming up. Let me know when you're ready, Mr. Anthony Walker.
Whenever you are.
All right. Our second set of sponsors are start with Minuteman Sewer and Drain, Minuteman Plumbing and Heating. It's weird going from Kim Jones to talking about plumbing and heating, but this is what you got to do to pay the bills, buddy. Minuteman Sewer and Drain, Minuteman Plumbing and Heating. Call 1-800-287-1772 for a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week service, and ask for my friend Bill. And certainly for people right now who are having frozen pipes and other heating and water issues, you know, Bill is a great contact for you. American Restoration Solutions. When disaster strikes, they'll guide you to recovery. Call 516-662-9377 and ask for Senior Account Manager Keith Dunn. New View Construction, established in 2007. They are the people to call for the finest craftsmanship and all of your general contracting needs. Call 516-924-5627 and do it with confidence. We have Sip and Serve waitress and bartending service. Elevate your next private party with the Sip and Serve Squad. Their awesome bar and wait staff will ensure your event will be unforgettable. Book now and let them handle the details while you enjoy the celebration. Call Jen at 516-528-6783. And certainly last but not least, our sweet lady, New York State licensed real estate person, Diane Keegan.
Keegan recovering from cataract surgery.
Oh, I
today.
didn't know that.
Yeah.
From All Island Estates Realty Corporation. You can call Diane directly at 516-458-1864 or email her in large print due to her cataract surgery at diane@allislandestates.com. If you are looking to rent, sell, or buy, make Diane your first call. And that concludes our sponsorship today. Thank you so much for all of our sponsors, and please contact them with confidence because they're all wonderful. that pretty much concludes our episode today. I don't know if we, talking about it before the show, if we anticipated that Kim was going to want to stay on for the whole show, and it turned out that she wanted to stay on for even longer than that.
Makes us feel good.
So it does make us feel good, and it certainly makes us feel like we're doing something right here. She was just splendid, right, Mike? I mean,
Amazing.
she was.
I can't, like I said, I'm not even lying. I'm getting texts.
So you get, is it what,
fantastic.
John Bianco?
Yep, my buddy Frank Licano.
I love that.
Fantastic. What a nice class person. Great interview.
Yeah. I love that you have some tried and true followers that will text you and let you know right off the bat that we're doing good.
Doing it right.
Listen, we're going to keep the freight train rolling. Next week, 1 week from today, we have former Major League Baseball player, ex-Met, current WPIX Channel 11 TV host, Nelson Figueroa, who is wonderful, glib, easy on the eye, and we're going to have a blast with him next Tuesday. And, certainly at the risk of we don't like to go too over 1 hour, we'll go ahead and let Mike close up with telling us some of the things that he has coming up, which I think there's plenty of.
Just go over the next couple of things. This Saturday night, we'll be at Millennium Fitness and Boxing Gym in the Bronx, right by the Throg's Neck, so it's only 5 minutes off the Throg's Neck, even if you're coming from Long Island. Carrie Karavis, me, Carla, Mario Bosco is going to do a spot on the show. We got
you know
celebrity,
what? This is no joke. This is a big show.
Yeah, no, it's going to be awesome. It's a great venue. And then Thursday night, I'll be at the Maples in Manorville with the lovely George Gallo.
That is going to be a great show, and the Bronx show. Is that the Milonis? Is that his room?
Milonis
is he going to be on the show?
He's going to be
no?
on the show. Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Milonis will be. Travis Grant's going to host.
That's kind of a home run show right there.
Yeah,
so
great show. It's a great venue.
If you guys live in that area, whether it's Westchester, Yonkers, in that region,
the Neck area, even from Long Island, it takes me 25 minutes.
It's not a big deal. If you live in Queens, you can get there in a hop, skip, and a jump. So
let me know if you want tickets. If you got 4 or more, I'll give you a group discount. We'll make it happen.
Okay, awesome. And Tony, what do we got with the Knock 'em Dead comedy? What do you have coming up?
Thank you, pal. January 24th, I'm hosting a show here in the Giggle Room.
And give us a little bit about who's on that show, what that's all about.
So there's a show that plays here on Govs every weekday morning at 9 a.m. It's called Coffee with the Dog. It's Matt Nappo. He's known as the dog.
And he's people know him, yeah.
Yes, and he's known as the dog.
Yeah.
But he has some other comedians on the show with him. So basically, it's all those comedians except him that's doing the show. It's called Coffee Brewed Show. G.D. Fenderson, who's from Delaware or Maine, I forget. Stephen Ortiz, who's also from that area. A fellow named Ron, Claire. They're all out-of-state comedians that are making their debuts.
Now, the dog won't be here, or he just won't be performing?
He originally was supposed to host.
Okay.
He's
Can't
not.
make it. Okay.
So they asked me to host. I don't know if
That's
he's
okay.
showing up or not.
It's going to be a great show nonetheless.
Yeah, it'll be fun. Thank you.
Yeah, and certainly govs.com for everything Govs. I mean, certainly we were very excited today when we saw that Governor sent out a 100,000 person email blast, essentially advertising the podcast studio, advertising the fact that the Herschy and Keegs show was having Kim Jones on, and then Nelson Figueroa next week. So we're always very much indebted to governors and all that they do here. So please go to govs.com and get all your tickets. There's some incredible shows from Anthony Rodia. I mean, who else? There's so many people.
I think I'll be here at the end of the month on the 30th. And
Mikey will be here. Tony's going to be here. I'm sure at some point I'll pop myself up on stage as well. And that's it, guys. Thank you for staying with us. We're a little bit over time today. Hope that's okay with you guys. And we'll be back with a vengeance next Tuesday with Nelson Figueroa. Have a great night.
Have a good night.